Welcome to the What Really Happened radio show. Because World War III is a really bad idea. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It is Friday, July 10th, 2015. Thank goodness it's Friday. Thank goodness it's Friday, and so forth and so on. We have a lot of stuff to talk about today. The phone lines are open, 877-300-7645, 877-300-7645. Tom is sitting in our control room, hand hovering over the telephone, ready to answer the phone when you call on in. Quick program note, in our third hour, the lovely Lady Claire will be joining us with her unique perspective on events that are going on in the world today. Now, a lot of stuff is going on, and I'm just going to start going down the stories here. Canada has intensified their air campaign in Iraq. So, you Canadians, yes, you're now involved in this third invasion of Iraq to slap those people of Iraq down because they don't want to live under U.S. puppet rule. And that seems like a really good reason to be risking the lives of your sons and daughters, not to mention the cost of all the hardware that's going on over there. Now, the United States has submitted a draft resolution to the United Nations Security Council calling for a new investigation into the use of chemical weapons in Syria by Bashar al-Assad. They're basically regurgitating that whole lie that they tried all last year to try and gin up an excuse why it's okay for American sons and American daughters and Canadians and everybody else to pour on into Syria and get rid of that pesky Bashar al-Assad who will not run his country for the benefit of American corporations. And so we're basically back to this. We have a right to invade, insert name of target here, because they have weapons of mass destruction. Which gets us on back to Iraq, because over at telesurftv.net they have an article talking about recently declassified documents showing how the CIA reacted to the fact that nobody ever found weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. And they did two separate searches. They did a big search, huge, couldn't find anything. Oh, no, there have to be weapons. We need to find weapons of mass destruction to justify the war. So they went in with a second search, and again came up nothing. And we know now that it was just another lie to start a war, just like the Lusitania not carrying weapons, torpedoes in the Gulf of Tonkin, Spanish mine in Havana Harbor, on and on and on and on. This is how the government starts wars. They tell a big, huge lie. Oh, their leadership is an evil dictatorship. They've got weapons of mass destruction. They're coming to kill you. They've got a Death Star and all the rest. And they're getting ready to try it again at the Security Council. Now, the resolution calls for an investigation, and prior United Nations investigations into Syria repeatedly confirmed the only chemical weapons being used were by the hired mercenaries. Some of them still had markings on the cases made in the United States. But they're going back in, they're going to try and arm twist the United Nations to say, okay, all right, you can go invade Syria if you want. Meanwhile, over in Yemen, we have more than 2,800 people, non-combatant civilians, have been killed. The media is ignoring it in their rush to go on out and bash the Confederate flag. Saudi Arabia has been forced to withdraw $65 billion from their general monetary reserve, which I guess is the price, for committing war crimes in Yemen. It's not cheap to commit collective punishment and war crimes. All right, we're going to grab ourselves a phone call. Dustin in New Jersey. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind? Dustin, are you there? I am not hearing Dustin.
Hello?
There you are. Okay. I was starting to think we had another computer breakdown.
Hey, Mike, I wanted to talk about the economy, but first, you're right. U.S. shouldn't throw stones when they live in a glass house. We're an empire of chaos, and so was the British Empire, and they still are. Go around the world, mess everybody up, and it's a wonder that we're letting all these immigrants in. We're going to let the other countries' immigrants in, too, like Iraq and stuff, because, that's more, little people to help the system out when it,
Yeah, except that it's not working. All of these, it's not just here in the United States of America, all over Europe, this flood of migrants coming in is not working to make the system work any better. They're a drain on social services. There aren't enough jobs for them all. We don't have enough jobs for the legal American citizens, and they're still letting them pour over that southern border.
Yeah, as long as they can give the poor credit cards, right, and interest-free for like 10 years on their cars, they don't care about the regular American people anymore. Neither do the British, their citizens. It's just the oligarchical totalitarian system the West has.
No, what they're trying to do is destroy any sense of a national identity by blurring everybody here. I mean, we had that Politico the other day saying we should flood the American South with immigrants from foreign countries to ethnically cleanse this whole southern white mentality and just get it out of here. And it's a big part of pushing for a global government is to blur the national identity of separate sovereign nations. It's going to be very hard for people to say, I'm an American, when they look around and see all these people from the Middle East and Africa and Asia and everything walking around. I think it's a deliberate part of the policy. They're trying to basically erase a sense of a national identification because that is a threat to the eventual plan for a global government.
And Mike, on the economy, I really believe in my heart that since the Chinese stock market was collapsed, I think that was not a computer glitch or a hack. I think it was a way to stop the bleeding, because if you look, China is not allowing certain stocks to be sold, right? You only could buy them.
China's taken a lot of steps, mostly targeting at the short sellers. China has come out saying that what happened to their stock market earlier this week was a deliberate, intentional attack on their economy. And they're, needless to say, a little upset about it. Now, if you're talking about the halt in trading on the New York Stock Exchange earlier this week, apparently there was a memo circulated on the trading floor saying, look out for these stocks. They're going to cause a problem for us. And the story is now coming out that basically they pulled the plug on the trading system in order to erase orders that were placed for these problematic stocks. And CNN apparently actually reported on this memo and then, of course, Orwellized the story from their website. But it's already out on the web.
Hey, Mike, is there we know the Federal Reserve's crooked with the money, but, is there an alternate system to a consumption-based economy? Because, we're consuming more than we produce, not just in the U.S., but the whole Western world, pretty much, right?
Well, to keep an economy running, it's got to be in balance. You have to do as much consuming as you are producing, and it got out of balance because Wall Street, we had a generation of middle managers who grew up to be CEOs with no connection to actually producing products. That was a gift, if you will, from the Harvard Business School in the post-World War II years, where the economy was booming because we were the only country whose industrial base hadn't been bombed into rubble. And it led to a generation of business managers who don't want to get their hands dirty actually making the product, so we'll just ship it to some other part of the world. And the U.S. actually, because of Bretton Woods, came to see itself as the banker to the world, that we were just going to loan these pieces of paper and ink to the rest of the world and make money on that, and we didn't have to worry about manufacturing and agriculture because the rich people were still going to get rich off of that. And the American people whose jobs were based in manufacturing and agriculture, well, who cares about them? We'll invent the service-based economy. Remember that back in the 1980s? This idea that we were going to operate the U.S. economy by doing each other's laundry for a fee. And it really didn't work. It created more tax opportunities for the government, but it didn't work to support the economy because you cannot keep an economy going without having something to sell that other people want to buy. Just forcing them to borrow your currency at the point of a gun at interest it hasn't worked. Absolutely has not worked. Dustin, do you have anything more to say?
No, good luck with your new website.
All right, thank you very much. All right, we're going to be back with another phone call after these words from our sponsors. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, and we're going to go ahead and take a phone call real quick here. Jeff in Minnesota. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind today?
Well, I want to thank you because when I download your podcast and I listen to hour one, it goes to hour two and hour three by itself, where some podcasts, they just loop the same one. So you must know something about this stuff.
Well, actually, the podcasts are now being run by GCN, so George gets the credit for that one if it's working conveniently for you.
And I write down on a 3x5 card your website and a couple others, and I, drive like a cab thing, and I talk to people about stuff, and it says, you probably wondered, about the alternative media. Well, here, check this out. And I'm sure people do.
Well, our traffic has been trending up here, and I prefer the term independent media because alternative has a negative connotation to it of being outside and on the fringe, and we're not anymore. We have more people reading our website than most big city newspapers, and so I prefer the term the independent media.
Okay, now, on your new website, you know how you have these, different fields? It starts all wars are bankers' wars, 11th Marble, and goes down to Big Bang?
Yeah.
Okay, I don't know if you're going to have that on the new one, but next to Big Bang, I'd like to see the one that says bumper music.
Okay. All right, I'll put that on the list of to-dos. At the moment, the new site doesn't have all the little articles up at the top. I'm looking at maybe having a pop-up menu or just putting them on a separate page. I'm trying to have a less cluttered layout for the new one. I'm not saying this thing is done. We're launching tonight, but it's a work in progress, and I'm going to be tinkering and improving and adding things to it for months, forever. Art is never finished. It's only abandoned. And it has been a nightmare to get this thing up and running with the responsive theme. And even Drupal says their newer versions of Drupal are not geared to community websites or individual bloggers. They're designed for what they politely term enterprise deployment. In other words, it's now something they want companies to use, where you have an IT staff where you've got one guy who knows CSS and one guy who knows PHP and one guy who knows this. So it's been a lot of work to get it to where it is right now. It's not finished, and there's a lot more to do, but we are going to plug it in tonight and give it a whirl and see what happens.
Okay, thanks a lot.
All right, thanks an awful lot. Okay, now getting on back to the situation. Over in Iran, Kerry is now making noises about just walking away from the talks because of more delays. And the delays aren't coming from the Iranian side. The delays are because all of these various kibitzers, like Israel and Israel's whores in the U.S. Congress, are trying to add new things. It's a negotiating tactic that the Israelis are master of, and it's called the just one more thing approach. You're almost got a deal ready to sign. They say, oh, just one more thing. All right, we'll go along with, oh, just one more thing. All right, we'll go, just one more thing. Until finally the other side realizes that they're not being negotiated with in good faith, and they quit and walk away. At which point the people playing the just one more thing say, aha, they're the ones who refuse to sign the deal. They're the bad people. And that seems to be the game of what's going on. And, the U.S. is throwing up their hands and saying, look, we're just trying to be reasonable here. All that we're asking is that Iran give up nuclear power and heat their homes with burning camel dung, sell their oil only for U.S. dollars, accept a private central bank, and totally disarm their regular non-nuclear military so we can come in and break the place up into itty-bitty pieces we can bully around. And why is that such a problem? You guys are being so unreasonable. And Netanyahu's out there saying he's going to find a way to kill the deal. He's even gone so far as to say that if the deal is signed, Israel's just going to go on in and blow up Iran's nuclear power station the way Israel did to Iraq's, because they're building nuclear weapons under there. And as a reminder, following the 2003 invasion of Iraq, invasion number 2, international experts examined the ruins of the Osirak power station that Israel had destroyed, and they found nothing there except a wrecked power station and radioactivity all over the ground. So Israel's actually batting zero in terms of actually locating other nuclear weapon programs in the Middle East other than its own. And they want this deal to be killed. I mean, we're seeing this huge, well-funded advertising campaign. It's on Fox News about somehow signing a deal to open up Iran's nuclear weapons program for inspections is going to somehow make it easier for Iran to get a nuclear weapon. We're into full-on Orwell here. Israel wants Iran broken up into little pieces like they're getting ready to do to Iraq. So they can be easier to control and easier to bully. The private central bankers want a private central bank in Iran. The U.S. wants Iran's oil sold only for the U.S. dollar. There are all these people who see war on Iran as their best option. They're just trying to figure out some way to make it look like it's Iran's fault. That's the part they're missing. A way to trick you into thinking that somehow Iran is the bad guy that deserves being invaded, just like they're trying to do with Russia right now. Now, Paul Craig Roberts has got an article basically laying out what's going on. Okay, Iran's threat to the U.S. is its independence. They're not Washington, D.C.'s vassal state, and that's why the U.S. has been so angry with Iran since 1979, when the Iranian people kicked out their U.S. puppet ruler, the Shah, who was put in with a CIA coup d'etat back in 1953. They kicked out their U.S. puppet ruler, and the U.S. doesn't forgive that kind of situation. Look how long it took for them to forgive the Cuban people for kicking out Batista. That's what's going on. The American empire wants obedient vassal states around the globe, and there's some nations just don't want to go along with that, like Iran, Russia, China. And that's why they're trying to gin up a war. But it's not going to work unless they can trick you into thinking somehow this is Iran's fault, and Iran deserves to be invaded and destroyed. The big lie. Now, let's turn to what's going on down in Greece. There are a lot of conflicting news reports about what's going on, and we're not getting a clear, complete picture. Everybody is picking one little aspect of the story and reporting on that as if that's the sum total. And we're seeing articles about how, absolutely no more austerity. That's what the people voted for. Now we're hearing that apparently there was some kind of an austerity plan, a very strict, severe one passed by the Greek Parliament last night. Not everybody in the Greek Parliament has signed off on it. Some of the top ministers are looking at it. We're hearing that Germany is very quietly agreeing to forgive a large portion of Greece's debt to get the deal, but they're not making that public because of the problem of other EU member nations demanding the same thing. So it's a very complicated issue, but a lot of people are starting to think that Tsipras and the Syriza party have betrayed the Greek people. We could see riots and civil war out of this. We'll be right back. America, welcome back to the show. We're talking about the economy. We're talking about Greece in particular. There are a lot of contradictory reports coming out about exactly what's going on. Apparently, Tsipras has crafted an austerity package. The parliament voted it through. There is some dissent within some of the Greek ministers. And it is now in the hands of the Troika whether or not they're going to go with it. Now, there's already tremendous anger growing at what appears, on the face of it, to have been a complete sellout by Tsipras and the Syriza party, especially following the referendum that said no more austerity. Now, as I mentioned before, there is a report that Germany has very quietly agreed to write off a large portion of Greece's debt. But that's something that, if it does happen, is not going to be officially acknowledged, because otherwise all these other European Union nations are going to want exactly the same thing. Now, we're seeing a report up in an Investment Watch blog that German politicians looking at this, they're not saying this is a good deal for them. They're voicing skepticism. Germany may not go along with this. Now, we're hearing other reports that with this ultimatum that the Troika handed down to Greece of a deal by Sunday or you are gone, there are reports that newly printed drachmas are already on the streets in Greece. They're being seen in the banks and businesses. And this is coming from Bloomberg, no less, that there are new Greek drachmas on the streets. Now, supposedly, the heads of all these financial institutions are on a multi-way teleconferencing call. We're waiting to hear what they say, yes or no. And we still see the corporate media out there trying to put the blame for all of this on the Greek people. Oh, they're lazy. They spend all day long drinking ouzo. They only want to work 40 hours a week. That's just silly. A 40-hour work week, that's just not realistic anymore, which they're getting the same thing from Jeb Bush, I might add. The problem with what happened in Greece, and it's a problem for every single nation underneath a private central bank, is that private central banking, by design, creates more debt than it creates money with which to pay the debt until the debt crashes the entire system, and the money junkies buy up all the real assets of a nation and the people for pennies on the dollar or pennies on the euro. It's designed that way, to put the ownership of the entire planet into the hands of these few banking families, to bring back feudalism and serfdom, because that was a cool system. The money junkies loved feudalism and serfdom. That's what they want, this idea of democracy, of people running their own lives, of people creating their own money. Oh, boy, got to get rid of that one. All right, we're going to grab ourselves a phone call. Chad up in British Columbia, aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Michael. This is kind of off topic, but it's financially related, I think. Have you ever heard of the MMS by Jim Humble, the Miracle Mineral Supplement by Jim Humble, and whether you're encouraged by it or not?
I've heard of it. I haven't tried it. I'm not qualified to comment on it. And, I would prefer that callers not call on in and try and get free airtime for a commercial presentation, so thank you very much for the phone call. All right, article coming out of thehindu.com. BRICS, Shanghai Cooperative Organization, the East Asia, the EA, EU, all of these put together, can define a new multipolar world order, which is what they all want. They have had 50 years of a pretty much unipolar world. Yes, while the Soviet Union was around, it was considered bipolar, with all the negative connotations of that. But ever since the collapse of the Soviet Union, the U.S. government has taken the position that it's an American planet. That was the agenda being put forward by the Project for the New American Century back in the 1990s. That said, we're the only remaining superpower, we should control the world. And the rest of the world is seeing how that worked out. Right in front of their eyes, in the streets of their towns, right in their homes, in the hunger and the starvation and the squalor, in the collapse of infrastructure, in the endless wars to keep rebellious provinces in line. And so these other nations are saying it's time to go back to a multipolar world and not let one power-mad, money-junkie nation call all the shots. And they're absolutely right. One of the reasons I'm opposed to a one-world government and a one-world bank is that it's only a matter of time before we have another Hitler or another George Bush attain that top spot and say, I'm tired of all these extra people around here, it's time to kill them. And by the way, Obama is in fact bringing back the death panels. I'm going to be talking about that later in the show. Because the ultra-rich and the ultra-powerful, they view all of you as livestock, as a herd. And, we cull the cattle herds and the sheep herds and the chicken flocks if we've got too many to make money off of. It's just a reasonable thing to do here. That's how they see you. Inevitably, power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. What is best for humankind as a whole is a world filled with multiple small nations, each taking care of themselves, trading across their borders, to hold each other in check. The same principle the Founding Fathers had for the United States of America. Power and authority is diffused across the nation. Power is reserved to the states, to the people. The central government is deliberately kept weak in order to keep it from being abusive. And just as we have seen that system be corrupted in the United States of America, we understand it's inevitable that a global government will become just as corrupt, just as autocratic, just as tyrannical. So, cheers to BRICS and the rest of these other countries, because if they don't succeed, We are going to wind up in that dystopian future the science fiction movies are always talking about, THX 1138 for real, or Aldous Huxley's Brave New World. Now, as you know, earlier in the week, there was this strange 3-hour shutdown of the New York Stock Exchange. Immediate rush to say, wasn't a cyber attack. The rest of you keep your money in the bank. This is just New York Stock Exchange. You got nothing to worry about, even though the Wall Street Journal's website and United Airlines went down. And today we're hearing that TD Ameritrade is having problems routing their orders around. Now, maybe it's just that our over-engineered, over-corporatized, bloatware software system is just catching up with us. Because I've just learned from personal experience, the current state-of-the-art systems are simply too complex for a single individual to comprehend them all. And if you can't comprehend something, you can't effectively manage it. I mean, that's why I'm in love with my VIC-20 that I got back. You know, you can have fun with it. It's not just this slave master. And again, as I mentioned earlier in the show, and this is being reported over at Rumor Mill News, there was a memo distributed on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange before the trading day began of stocks that could be a problem for that day. CNN reported on that, then yanked the story off of their servers. So it may very well be that the contagion from China had carried around the world, because one thing that they did acknowledge, this so-called computer glitch at the New York Stock Exchange erased all the pending trade orders that had been saved up overnight. We'll be right back. Hi, America. Welcome back to our show here. So let's turn on over to Donald Trump, because he's getting a lot of news right now in the corporate media, all of it bad. They're gunning for him. They're absolutely determined to get him to back off or shut up or go away. He's getting the Ron Paul treatment already. So we're looking at an article over in the Star Tribune. Despite GOP pressure, Donald Trump not backing off his immigration rhetoric. And if you read the article, you can see how the bias is in the language. You know, Trump refused to back off his portrayal of Mexican immigrants as criminals. Now, Donald Trump shouldn't back off, and if he did, he would destroy his own credibility. Now, the corporate media is trying to smear Trump by claiming that he said all illegal immigrants are criminals. Technically, that's correct. All illegal immigrants are, in fact, criminals by virtue of the fact that they are here in the United States illegally in the first place. There is no illegal immigrant who is not a criminal. Let's start from that beginning. But that isn't what Donald Trump said. He said a large number of them are criminals, and statistics on crimes committed by illegals supports that position. Now, the politically correct, anti-truth people are afraid of Trump because he's developed a backbone, and he's willing to talk about what's really going wrong with this nation rather than toe the politically correct, accepted party doctrine that everything will be fine now that we've legalized gay marriage across the country and you shouldn't worry about anything else. So the GOP, the party machine, the corporate media, they're already giving Trump the Ron Paul treatment. They want to get him out of the race as quickly as they can because he's a threat to the status quo. He's a threat to whatever agenda is behind this open borders policy. And he's made other comments about other topics that are a threat to the status quo. Now, Trump has said if he gets kicked out of the GOP, he may go third party. And he's got enough money to mount a powerful campaign without selling out to anybody. And despite my earlier misgivings about him, I'm going to support him. Because he's the only candidate out there who's actually dealing with what's really going on in this country. And not just spouting the politically correct pap that we're seeing from all the other candidates here. Another article on the same topic over at the Political Insider. Donald Trump refuses to apologize. Fox News was trying to put him in a real corner. You should apologize. You should say you were sorry. You've hurt the feelings of all those illegal immigrants. And Trump came back with "I can never apologize for the truth," and that is a powerful statement. Nobody should ever apologize for the truth. The politically correct movement is out there to make you feel ashamed for saying the truth. We're not supposed to say that, yes, there are a major problem with criminals coming in over the open borders. It's politically incorrect to mention that they're carrying infectious diseases because they're not getting the health examinations that legal immigrants are required to go through. By the way, right now, the illegals are responsible for 75% of all federal drug sentences handed out in this country. That's the reality. And Trump is right to talk about it. And the politically correct movement that wants to look the other way from the drug crime, the auto theft, the rapes, the child molestations, because it's not politically correct to mention that, they're the ones who've got a problem. They're the ones who are living in a world of delusion. Now, Lindsey Graham is on the warpath. He says Trump is going to kill the party. We can't have somebody out there talking about immigration and illegal immigrants. It's going to harm us because we're courting that Hispanic vote. We need to get that Hispanic vote away from the Democrats here. And Lindsey Graham has revealed what is wrong with both of the two so-called traditional parties. For them, it's all about winning. It's all about getting what they want. And actually taking care of the nation, that's not even a factor any longer. It just isn't. We don't care what happens to ordinary people. We just have to win the Congress. We have to win the White. We have to be the winners. We have to be victory or death, or whatever it is they're telling themselves in their little Scotch-fueled confabs. So, yeah, the GOP is going to treat Donald Trump the way they treated Ron Paul back in 2008 and 2012. We can already see it coming. They want to pre-choose the candidates next year, so once again you have your choice of which candidate is going to continue to support things as they are. They don't dare let anybody who might want to change things get into a position of power. Because they like things just the way they are, with Wall Street executives paying themselves billion-dollar bonuses and sharing it generously with members of Congress. The system works for the 1%. The system works for members of Congress. They don't want anybody to upset their apple cart. And that is what's going on with Donald Trump. And I'm starting to like him more and more. If for no other reason than he's going to force the politicians and the American people to confront what's really going on in this country and not get distracted with fringe issues about gay marriage and abortion and, white male privilege over minorities and white male or male privilege in general over the women and all these other manufactured fringe issues that they all run their campaigns on, because they don't dare talk about the economy. They don't dare talk about the wars. Don't dare talk about how Israel owns the United States Congress and usually the White House as well. They don't want to talk about that. They don't want anybody to talk about that. It's politically correct to be out there talking, to bash the Confederate flag. That's an important issue. And have you noticed the corporate media gave that issue about the Confederate flag far more attention than they have criminal activity by the illegal immigrants? Okay. Anyway, now, little interesting statistic. For the first time in history, since it was still a part of Mexico, California's population is predominantly Latino. White people are a minority. So I don't know why they're going on about white privilege and everything out there. But that's what's going on here. Now, not all the Latinos in California are there illegally. Many are legal citizens who came in following the rules, and welcome. Hope it lives up to your expectations. I understand for a lot of them it hasn't, and they've gone back to Mexico. But there is a sizable illegal population there, and they drink water, and California just doesn't have it. Now, I hate to actually admit it, but Ann Coulter said something I actually agree with. The immigration amnesty has killed more Americans than ISIS has. That's a reality. But it's not politically correct to talk about that. It's politically correct to demonize ISIS and hate ISIS, and their political correctness is mind control. It's an attack on our Bill of Rights, especially the freedom of speech. And just to really tick off the GOP leadership, there's been another poll in North Carolina about GOP hopefuls for the White House. Trump won it. He's at the top. And he is leading in all these polls because he's got the spine to talk about real problems and not be a politically correct wimp like every other candidate out there. And it's going to work. He's going to have a huge grassroots support. He's going to soon have the grassroots support that Bernie Sanders does, who's another one they want to try and give the heave-ho to. We're going to take a break for our news, and we'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 2. The phone lines are open, 877-300-7645. We are hearing that apparently there is a growing backlash within the Greek government against Tsipras' sudden dramatic concessions to the EU, because apparently the deal that has been put together by Tsipras is a repeat of virtually the same deal that the Greek voters rejected in the referendum. And people are starting to wonder what's going on. Was Tsipras bought off? They blackmailing him, and we are getting word that protesters are already gathering in the streets of Athens. This could turn into out-of-control rioting, if not a complete civil war. Still no word from the Troika whether they're accepting the deal or not. We're keeping an eye on that. Now, getting on back to Donald Trump. As you know, major corporations have been severing contracts and financial ties with him as punishment for being politically incorrect, because you're not allowed to have a job or run a business in this country unless you agree to be politically correct and not say anything that's going to be offensive to anybody anywhere in the country. And Trump is still in first place, and I think the reason is very simple. The American voter is sick and tired of politicians who get up there and proclaim their love of Israel and then go off about gay marriage or feminism or racism or anything else and will never talk about the real problems going on here. So Lindsey Graham is out there saying that Donald Trump is destroying the GOP and its chances next year. Actually, Lindsey is wrong. Jeb Bush did it. With this comment, he came out earlier in the week that the economy would just be fine if the American people understand they have to work more hours every week. That's going to fix everything. Well, first of all, it's a nonsensical statement. The jobs are not there for the American people to work at. We have 93 million Americans willing and able to work who have not been able to find a job. That's the reality. We don't have enough jobs for the legal American citizens, and political correctness says let's bring in all these illegals from Central America and Mexico to stress an already disastrous job market. But Jeb Bush says, no, your problem is you've got to work more hours. Well, Jeb is proving himself to be as out of touch and clueless as Mitt Romney was. Because the reality is right now, for people who are working in the United States of America, 85% of all men are working more than 40 hours a week. 66% of all women who are working more than 40 hours a week. When I was still working in the computer animation visual effects industry, the 50-hour work week had become the norm. So Jeb Bush is already showing himself to be totally out of touch with what's really going on in this country. Now, as you heard from that commercial for ourflags.com, where you can order your own Confederate flag to show your independence from the PC crowd. We're hearing more and more reasons. What was going on? Why was this whole thing kicked up, along with obviously being something the media can make a big deal about, so that you're not paying attention to what's going on with the economy and the wars and so forth and so on. But it turns out that apparently some of the planners at the GOP had this idea that if they made a big deal about the Confederate flag being the symbol of slavery and then moved to ban it, that the black voters would abandon the Democratic Party and come on over and vote for the Republicans because they got rid of that gosh darn symbol after telling us that it meant something bad. And I think the GOP planners kind of blew it there. It's a dangerous degree of naivete to, first of all, take the Confederate flag and say, oh, we will tell you that it's a symbol for slavery, and then we will get rid of it so that all you black voters will vote for us. And they botched that one up. And it's causing damage all over across the country. In Naples, Florida, this woman got a notice she was being evicted from one of these planned communities, homeowners association and everything. She's being evicted. And the property management group that runs her complex told her it's because her son had put a Confederate flag in the window. We don't want your kind here. We're kicking you out. I hope she sues that property management company, because that's over the line. It's her home, and she can put whatever, actually was her son, put the flag in the window. Now, I understand if you're putting, like, child porn pictures in the front window, that's an area of concern for the community. And by the way, 4th of July, when I hang out my Gadsden flag, nobody complains. I've actually had people come over and want to borrow that. Now, over in North Carolina, the PC state government there said we are going to end the sale of license plates that bear the Confederate battle flag. And, of course, the immediate response was they sold out. Everybody wanted to get one while they still could. It's backflashing. It's just like the gun grabbers. Every time they talk about grabbing guns, gun sales go through the roof. Confederate flag sales through the roof. And you know what's really ironic about this? That particular flag was never officially a flag of the Confederate States of America. It's just a cool-looking design. And Hollywood, over the years, kept going back to that flag to represent the Confederate troops in movies and TV shows. So people came to say, oh, that's the flag of the Confederacy. And it isn't. So they're talking about, they've taken a flag that wasn't actually part of the Confederacy. They presume to tell us all this is what it symbolizes, which is arrogant in the extreme. I'm a big boy. I'll decide what something means to me. Okay, I'll decide what the symbol symbolizes for me. You don't have that authority to tell me it means something over here that serves your political agenda. And so it was never actually a flag of the Confederacy. The politically correct crowd comes on out and says, oh, it's the symbol of slavery and no other interpretation is to be allowed because that would be politically incorrect. And we're going to ban it so that we can win black votes next year. That's how absurd American politics has become. Now, down in Marion County, Florida, their county commissioners took down the Confederate flag that was flying over the county's government buildings. The public outcry was so huge, they've put it back up. Now, we talked about this being a possibility, and now it's happened. The Memphis City Council has voted unanimously to remove the remains of Confederate General Nathan Bedford Forrest. Now, you know, anytime somebody goes into a cemetery and sprays the tombstones with racist comments or swastikas or whatever, it's a big deal. It's grave desecration. How could they do that? And now the politically correct crowd is saying it's okay to desecrate the graves of the Confederates. They're okay. You can't desecrate these, but it's politically correct to desecrate the graves as long as they're Confederate. It's acceptable to abuse these people and not acceptable to abuse others. That's a big part of where political correctness falls down. There's always special cases. Not okay to talk about these, okay to talk about these. In a republic, in a democracy, the rules apply everywhere. Racism is bad regardless of which direction it's going on. Desecration of a grave is bad regardless of who's being desecrated. But that's how out of control this political correctness has become. It's okay to desecrate graves of Confederate soldiers. Who cares about that? Next thing, they're going to want the remains of the Hunley to be blown up. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And I got a couple of emails from people saying, what is this thing about the Hunley? So for those of you who are not following that particular story, the CSS Hunley was the first military submarine in history to successfully sink an enemy ship. The crew did not survive the attack. The Hunley was lost and was only rediscovered a few years ago in an expedition funded by adventure writer Clive Cussler. And it has been recovered. It is in a museum being restored. And, of course, the remains of the crew were still on board, and they were given a proper burial at White Point's Garden Graveyard. So are the people who are trying to erase the Confederate flag and digging up Confederate generals, are they going to insist that the remains of the Hunley be thrown back into the ocean and simply erase that bit of maritime history? Are they going to want the crew of the Hunley dug up from White Point's Garden Graveyard just thrown back in the ocean? You can see how ridiculous this gets very quickly. And if you ban the stars and bars because somebody's offended by it, politicians can always find somebody somewhere who's offended by something. And the whole theory of political correctness is that things have to be banned for all of us if they offend some small individual group over here, who may have a completely different interpretation of what they're seeing. Because the stars and bars do not symbolize slavery for everybody who looks at the flag. For many, it's family history. I had ancestors on both sides of the Civil War. Same thing with the Gadsden flag, the yellow flag with the coiled rattlesnake, don't tread on me. For a lot of Americans, it's the symbol of the American Revolution, of breaking free from tyranny. Back in 2013, the PC crowd was trying to ban that because, it's the symbol of the Tea Party. We can't have the symbol of the Tea Party. Well, you know something? The Tea Party has every right to have a symbol. Political correctness is an attack on the First Amendment right to freedom of speech. And Hillary's going along with that. She's getting ready to sell out the First Amendment in exchange for Israeli campaign cash. We've got to stop the boycotts. Boycotts are protected free speech. Now, I wish this was a humor and satire article, but it is not. This is appearing over in Prison Planet. Democrats in California, who apparently have got nothing better to do, have introduced a bill to ban the words husband and wife in all government documents because they're anti-gay. If we use husband and wife, it's going to make the gays feel bad. So we have to use the politically correct term of partner or spouse or married couple, because we don't want to offend these people. This is not a satire piece. This is political correctness out of control. And I'm going to continue to call Claire my lovely wife. And you'd better get used to it, because I'm not changing. And I don't think gay people really are offended by saying husband or wife. It's absurd. Federal judge has just ordered the cancellation of the Washington Redskins federal trademark because it's disparaging to Native Americans. Now, the ruling does not prevent the team from continuing to use the Redskins names if it wishes. What it does is open up trademark infringement. Everybody can now make Redskins this and Redskins that. Make huge amounts of money. We're into book-burning proportions here. Now, the Redskins team may change their name and their brand and the logo and get a whole new trademark, which is going to be a boon to all the licensed vendors because everybody's going to be buying all the T-shirts with the new team and the new logo and all the politically correct stuff. And, of course, all the current Redskins logoed stuff is going to be instantly collector's items. So it stimulates the economy, and that makes it a good thing. No, it isn't. It's ridiculous. And the reason it's ridiculous is we have way too many people running around this country whose entire sense of self-worth rests on always finding something to be offended by. Oh, I'm offended by that flag. I'm offended by that flower. I'm offended by that color. I'm offended by that music. I'm offended by that book. And this is grist for politicians who hate the idea of freedom and independence to come on in and say the politically correct thing for you to do is not use that flag, not use that color, not use that word, not use that logo, not use that graphic, not play that music, not think that thought, which is the real goal here. Now, we were talking about this ridiculous story out of Politico about how the South should be flooded with foreign immigrants to ethnically cleanse those southern white people out of existence here. And apparently over at Ryerson University, they have a group called the Racialized Students Collective, which is putting out messages saying that whites, non-racialized people, that your race and ethnicity is taking up space and silencing others. And I want to make a point here. Reverse racism is still racism. And one of the downsides of trying to end discrimination is how political opportunists will sense the shift and try and magnify it, go for a reversal for political and monetary gain. Not being racist means not being racist in any direction. And you don't cure racism by being racist the other way, which we see a lot of in quota systems. Oh, these poor people, they've been discriminated against, so now we're going to discriminate in favor of them. No, that's still the same problem. It's still racism. Now, as I mentioned before, Hillary Clinton is out there screaming that Congress and corporations have to work to end the boycott Israel movement. And the more money she gets from Sheldon Adelson and Haim Saban, the more vocal she gets about ending boycotts. And the problem is, boycotts are a recognized form of nonviolent protest protected as free speech under the First Amendment. Hillary is out there proclaiming her willingness to subvert one of our most basic freedoms to please a foreign government. We've had enough politicians eager to sell out America to please that foreign government. We can't afford it any longer. We can't tolerate it. It is not acceptable. No government can serve two masters. And a government that serves Israel does not, will not, and cannot serve the American people. We need leaders who are going to put America first, second, and third. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. I'm watching Fox News, and they're covering the ticker tape parade being given to the U.S. women's soccer team who won the Women's World Cup, and they're going on down there. And all of the team members, they got their own selfie sticks out there. Like there isn't enough photographic and video coverage of them being in the parade. They got to get out there with their selfie sticks. I think selfie sticks are a terrible, terrible symptom of vanity run amok in this country. And our educational system long ago stopped being about education and said, well, you don't need to really be smart. We need to build up your self-esteem to believe that you're the best in the world. American exceptionalism and, Americans are great and the deity sits up nights to admire you. And the end result is everybody's going around with a selfie stick taking pictures of themselves. Like anybody else wants to see them. I'm sorry. Unless you're a celebrity, nobody's interested in your selfies here. Now, getting on back to Hillary Clinton, she has come out supporting the illegal Israeli settlements. She's out there trying to prove that she is going to be the best friend to Israel of anybody who's ever been in the White House. And going down the list, the only time she ever softened her stance was briefly as Secretary of State, where she conceded that maybe the Palestinians deserved a state of their own. That's the only time. Other than that, she's out there. She's going to do that. And by the way, trying to distract from her email server problems and the fact that she got caught lying yet again to CNN and the American people about those subpoenas. She's trying to distract everybody. She's launching her crusade against guns. She's out there. This is her new talking point. We need stricter gun control laws. And, of course, as the inevitable result, gun sales have reached record highs again. Maine has just legalized concealed carry without a permit. They've gone down the same path Vermont did. Got a gun? Put it in your pocket. Go on out. You're fine. Until you do something bad with it. And that's a big part of where this country really went wrong, because when I was a kid, the laws punished bad behaviors. They didn't punish possession of things. And, of course, everybody's looking at that recent shooting down in Charleston, where this Dylan Roof apparently was able to go out and buy a gun. Media originally said it was a gift. That turned out to be a fraud because it's a huge embarrassment. With a prior criminal record, he should not have gotten a permit to buy the gun. And the FBI is out there saying, well, there was a glitch. You know, the background check system let him buy a gun, really. It was a mistake, really. Nobody gave him that gun to stage a false flag shooting for political gain because, we don't do that sort of thing in the United States here, do we? Well, if the background check system isn't working, then let's scrap it. Isn't it amazing? We have all these very expensive bureaus that are supposed to do things, and it turns out they don't actually work. And yet every time they're caught in another failure, they say, oh, we need more money. Yeah, we messed up really bad, but we'll fix it if we have more money. Minerals Management Service dropped the ball on the Deepwater Horizon. Securities and Exchange Commission dropped the ball on Bernie Madoff. The FDA and the USDA have completely, totally sold out to the large agricultural and pharmaceutical corporations. The NSA can't find real criminals and terrorists. Let's just fire all those people. Or if they want to stay on a government paycheck, let's give them all shovels and have them go out there and repair the roads. Let them repair the schools. Slap some paint on there. Get something useful out of them. Now, allegations have surfaced. This is being reported over in the Real News. This is coming from veteran police officers Kenneth Butler and Neil Franklin. And basically they're talking about a report that was issued by the police union that says recently fired police chief Batts ordered police to stand down during the Baltimore riots to make the protesters look bad on TV. Oh, the protesters, they're bad, they're looting, they're doing all these things. And we had heard at the time when it was going on that police had been ordered to stand down. And Police Chief Batts said, well, that's ridiculous. Of course we didn't. We would never do that here. We're here to protect and to serve. No, turns out he let it happen. So the media could say the protesters who were protesting over police brutality, they're the bad people. The police are good. The public is bad. And you've got to remember all of that. Now, we have been talking about the poor quality and high cost of American military acquisitions for quite a while, to discourage this idea that just because the U.S. government spends far more on the machinery of mass death than other countries, that's an automatic guarantee of victory. We've been talking about the Independence-class littoral combat ships. They're already having to have large portions of the hull replaced for corrosion. The F-22 still asphyxiating its pilots. And, of course, the F-35, the biggest military boondoggle in history. Been very profitable for all the companies involved with it. Bid under cost plus. The more junk they put on it, the more money they make. And they've come up with something that is a piece of junk. Earlier in the week, we were talking about how the F-35 lost a dogfight against an F-16 from the 1970s. And, of course, the Air Force came out and said, well, that's not the whole story. I mean, the strength of the F-35 is its ability to project power in long range. Well, apparently, no. Back in 2008, there was a simulated war game called Pacific Vision. RAND conducted this on behalf of the Air Force. And they had F-22s and F-35s in a simulated aerial battle, supposedly over the Taiwan Strait. And they lost. 24 Chinese J-11 fighters brought nearly 250 long-range missiles to the mock fight. The same number of F-35s carried fewer than 100 AIM-120s. And as a result, China's jets easily overwhelmed the Americans. And the J-11 isn't even China's top fighter. And if you go back and you read the book or you see the movie, The Pentagon Wars, you'll see exactly what happened. They started with this simple little elegant design, and everybody said, oh, well, we got to put this on there, and we got to put that on there, and we have to add this. And they kept taking out seats for the troops who were supposed to be the primary mission of the Bradley infantry fighting vehicle. And it really is instructive to watch that movie because it is based on a true story of how this stuff happens. They'll take a platform and they just add things onto it because under cost plus, the more they add onto it, the more profit they make until you come up with something that is just overloaded with stuff they're probably not even going to need. And that's how you get the F-35. Limited sensors. Most of them still don't work. Compromised stealth. It's not as stealthy as they wanted it to be. Not enough energy to survive a dogfight. Too few weapons to be effective long range. It's a piece of junk. And it's the most expensive piece of junk yet produced by the military-industrial complex. The test pilots who've been flying that are saying, this is nonsense. It is inferior to current in-service Russian and Chinese fighter planes, and the F-35 still is not actually in service. They got the carrier hook finally working. The software for the onboard cannon still years away. The helmet fire control sensor system still doesn't work. It's a piece of junk, despite all the money that has been spent by the Pentagon. We're not in a position to prevail in a conventional war against Russia or China, or both of them together. And that guarantees the use of nuclear weapons in this next coming world war. Got to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. Now, all last week, we were hearing these warnings from the FBI, the Department of Homeland Security, CIA, everybody. Oh, ISIS is coming. There's going to be terror attacks. It's going to be horrible. And, of course, 4th of July came and went, and nothing happened. With the result that everybody is saying this is just another case of the government crying wolf, and how the government is basically 0 for 41 at actually predicting a terror attack. And it was a no-win situation for them, because had something actually happened, it's another obvious failure. So starting yesterday, 5 days afterwards, the FBI came out and said, oh, yeah, we stopped terror attacks. Absolutely, we stopped. And yesterday they were saying they stopped one. Today it's several plots. We stopped several plots to kill people in the U.S. Absolutely. Now, look for what should be there and isn't. If the FBI had actually thwarted some kind of a terror plot on July 4th, it would have been banner headlines July 5th. The fact that it took 5 days to come up with this, and of course there's no details about what's going on. Oh, we've arrested some people. Great, you set up some more patsies. If the FBI told me it was a sunny day, I'd be taking my raincoat with me. Now, over at the Office of Personnel Management, the director, Catherine Archuleta, has been let go, supposedly as the sacrificial lamb for the massive data hacks that took place, supposedly exposing classified information about federal government employees to the public. Have you noticed the double standard there? When it's their privacy being invaded, oh boy, that's a problem. When it's ordinary Americans, no big deal. You should just accept it as part of the price for the war on terror. Now, apparently, along with the NSA, there's another group out there called U.S. Cyber Command. Not content with the NSA getting all the glory, the Pentagon has their own little cyber warfare group, the U.S. Cyber Command. And they recently had an exercise, the Cyber Guard exercise, which simulated attacks on critical infrastructure. How do we know it wasn't them that broke into the Office of Management, or Office of Personnel Management, and dropped the blame on China? And I'll tell you, there's a very good reason why I don't think China had anything to do with this. So many records were taken that it was obvious something had happened. Somebody wanted this hack to be seen by virtue of how many records were compromised. They wanted it to be noticed. They wanted it to be in the news. Now, if China had really broken into this database to get information with which to blackmail people, the last thing they want is for the intrusion to be detected. They're only going to be taking selective records because they don't want it known. This was just scooping out everything. Stealing all these tens of millions of records, this was intended to be noticed and discovered. And we'll drop the blame on China, or we'll push the cybersecurity agenda, which is more government control over the Internet. Over in Great Britain, a senior British police chief has been charged with the rape and sexual assault of 3 boys yesterday, just hours after the beginning of a massive public inquiry into child sex abuse was officially opened. Gordon Anglesey, 78, senior policeman for Wales for 34 years. And I'm beginning to understand those people who are saying that this isn't a big deal for the people of Britain because it's been happening so much. People in positions of power buggering children are just part of the perks that go with the job. Whether you're Jimmy Savile or members of Parliament or police officers. They're getting... We had a scandal like that here in the U.S. a while back called the Franklin Scandal. It involved the Boys Town orphanage, and it went all the way up to the Bush White House. There was even a documentary done about it, Conspiracy of Silence, that was going to air on TV. And members of Congress came down and said, you will cancel this show and you will sell us all the copies of the videotapes. Or we will pass laws that will drive the cable TV industry out of business. And so the broadcaster caved. The show was canceled. The tapes were surrendered. But an editing work tape survived, which is now all over the net. And I don't understand what it is about people in positions of power where this is fun for them. To molest little tiny kids. I really do not understand that. Maybe it's part of the symptomology of these sociopaths who are driven to positions of power and control. Maybe that's part of it. It's one of their symptoms that they have to do this. It's kind of weird. Now, there's a big nationwide investigation going on into a huge scandal involving this company that did the red light cameras all across America. There were apparently bribes paid to city officials to get the contracts. There was apparently a lot of graft going on. The red light cameras were set too sensitive to generate additional revenue. This is Cincinnati, Columbus, all the way out to Colorado. And possibly in response to this, over in Santa Clarita, California, their red light cameras are all being taken down. These red light cameras were never about public safety. They were never about enforcing the law. It was simply another way to generate revenue from the population. We are in a stage right now where government openly pillages law-abiding citizens for their operating capital, whether it's police just taking money out of people's cars, TSA confiscating the stuff. I mean, it's ridiculous. This idea that they can take $15,000, $20,000 away from you because you might use it to buy drugs. What happens if you win the Powerball and all of a sudden you got a big pile of cash? Is the government going to come on in and say, I'm sorry, we're going to have to take that $1.5 million away from you because you might use it to buy drugs with? I mean, that's how ridiculous it's getting. Now, we put up a story on our webpage that is basically a reprise of this terrible accident that took place in San Francisco, where the U.S. government conducted a biological warfare experiment on the people of San Francisco. They dropped what they thought was a harmless pathogen into the fog at the Golden Gate Bridge to see how well the fog would carry the pathogen into the city itself. And the pathogen was selected to make people sick enough to go to the doctors so that they could track where the infection was going, but otherwise harmless. Unfortunately, it turned out not to be harmless. There were several deaths. Now we're seeing a story here in the Daily Mail, how the British government was carrying out biological warfare tests on passengers of the London Tube back in the 1960s, where they basically, send down germs that'll make you a little sick so we can track you. All of this, of course, is a violation of the Nuremberg Code, which says government may not conduct any medical experiments on anybody without informed consent. If you're a passenger on the London Tube and you don't know that they're dropping things down the vents, you obviously are not giving informed consent. If you are a resident of San Francisco wondering why that last fog bank coming in made you ill, you haven't given informed consent. These are all war crimes committed by governments against their own people. Anyway. Now then, interesting little article. Preparedness critics are history's cannon fodder. And basically, as you know, preppers have come under attack. You're obviously pessimists. You have no faith and trust in the government and the economy and the banks. And this article is basically coming back saying that those who are not being prepared wind up being the victims when the crashes happen. And of course, my corollary to that is, how do you identify a prepper? They're the ones not eating out of the trash dumpsters following a disaster, which is certainly true. We know there's an economic crash coming. Doesn't matter how hard they work to hold it off, they can't hold it off forever because of that 11th marble. And you should be prepared to deal with a couple of months of no supply chain, no outside electricity, no water, or you're not going to survive the coming problem. Okay, we're going to take another break for the news. We'll be back for hour number 3 and the lovely Lady Claire after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 3. The phone lines are open, 877-300-7645. And for those of you on BAM User TV, this gorgeous creature sitting behind me is the lovely Lady Claire, my lovely wife, my lovely wife, my lovely wife. Take that, California. All right, so what do you want to talk about first?
Well, the first thing I'd like to discuss gives me very grave concern, and I almost feel like I'd like to reach out and gently tap all of our viewers and our listeners, because this is just plain scary. It was a report that's been released by the Pentagon, National Military Strategy for 2015, and basically what it says is it concludes America is not safe unless it conquers the world. The U.S. plans war against Russia. The document announces a shift in focus from terrorists to quote-unquote state actors that are challenging international norms. Governments that challenge international norms are sovereign countries that pursue policies independently of Washington's. These revisionist states are threats, not because they plan to attack the U.S., which the Pentagon admits neither Russia or China intend, but because they are independent. And it took me a little while to get my head around this, but instead of attempting to negotiate like reasonable adults in the room would do, the Pentagon wants to wage war with Russia and China, and says this publicly, Michael, in a report?
Yes.
I have to wonder if these people have collectively gone barking mad or swallowed the Kool-Aid on the fact that these over-budget, late, not terribly well working bits of equipment that they've purchased for our military are really going to work when our military needs them. I'm worried that that may not be the case.
Well, as you know, this was set as policy back in the 1990s with the Project for the New American Century, where the U.S. was the only remaining superpower. It should be a unipolar world centered on Wall Street in Washington, D.C., and apparently they've gone too far down this path to reverse course on that. Now, they can't turn around and go back without crashing the economy and inviting a powerful backlash politically and economically, if not militarily, from all these countries that the U.S. has been messing around with all this time.
Yeah, it really very much concerns me that the Pentagon openly and in a report talks about their goal being war with Russia, you know.
Well, I'm not surprised. I mean, we know this is what's going on here. And unfortunately, as I've said many times before, because the U.S. became dependent on Bretton Woods, became dependent on interest paid on U.S. dollars borrowed for global trade and banking, they've allowed our manufacturing to decline in quantity and quality over the last 30 years. Nobody wants our agriculture because of the GMO disaster. And the U.S. is out there trying to arm twist the world to simply go along with toxic agricultural products from the U.S., continuing to use the U.S. dollar. And China is now saying that the major drop on their stock market earlier this week appeared to be a deliberate attack to try and destroy confidence in the yuan, to draw people back to the U.S. dollar. Okay, and it's leading to war with Russia and China. And my concern about that, first of all, I'm opposed to war anyway. I view any nation moving forward on a war agenda is basically admitting they have failed politically and economically to do what they need to be doing. But over and beyond my general abhorrence of war itself, I do not see the U.S. able to prevail militarily against peers like Russia and China. And as a result, entry into this war with Russia and China will eventually lead to the use of nuclear weapons. And that's just not something that I feel anybody should be comfortable with.
I absolutely agree. I'd kind of like to move forward to something that the U.S. military has done. And it has made what has been described as a monumental shift to hollow point pistol ammunition. Mike, I need to ask you, why and why now?
Well, it should be of concern to the American people because the types of ammunition used in actual combat in a war zone are restrained by various treaties. It's all supposed to be full metal jacket, non-expanding rounds. The goal is to wound the other troops rather than kill them, because if you wound an enemy soldier, it basically takes two more of the enemy to take care of that soldier. And killing a soldier outright is not as effective at limiting an enemy's ability to fight as wounding or crippling the enemy. That being said, if the Army is moving to hollow point ammunition, it's not for use in a war zone because hollow point expanding ammunition is expressly forbidden by numerous international treaties. And that means they're buying this hollow point expanding ammunition for use against the American people in the event of a domestic uprising.
That is really concerning and scary.
It should be.
Yeah.
It should be.
Because, the timing of this, it's very obvious that they're expecting things to break down completely.
It's only a matter of time. And they may glue Greece back together. Everybody's scratching their heads over Cyprus caving in, basically, to the EU demands at the 11th hour. We're continuing to hear that his own support within his own party is rapidly eroding away. Protesters are already gathering in the streets of Athens. Last word from Germany is they're not looking on this latest offer favorably. They're feeling they've got the upper hand and they should press for even more concessions than they already have. I'd
like to turn our attention back to the 2016 election. And I have found today that one presidential candidate has just promised to wage war in 4 different countries. And apparently everywhere Senator Lindsey Graham goes, he sees a crisis. And this is his first foreign policy speech as a presidential candidate. Graham told a packed room at the Atlantic Council think tank in D.C. what he would do if he became commander-in-chief, a list that tilted heavily toward where he would use military force. And he rattled off a laundry list of threats, but called the current diplomatic negotiations with Iran the greatest existential threat to world order and a North Korea in the making. Now, Mike, I don't know how many stocks this guy owns in defense industry.
Well, he's bought and paid for by Israel, and that's why he's on this let's get Iran bandwagon. Iran is not an existential threat to planet Earth. The U.S. is.
Yeah.
The U.S. is. Iran has not launched a war of aggression against another country in over 200 years. Mm-hmm. But, right now the U.S. government is facing a major problem because the American people are war-weary. We're tired of paying for the war. We're tired of seeing our own country crumble from neglect. Mm-hmm. We're tired of seeing our sons and daughters come back home in wheelchairs, if not cheap metal boxes. Yeah. And they're trying to basically escalate the war without having the popular support of the people. And remember what Sun Tzu wrote in The Art of War. The side that is convinced the moral right is on their side is the side that's generally going to prevail. Mm-hmm. And the U.S. government has lost that. They're not able to come up with a new Lusitania or a new Pearl Harbor or a new Gulf of Tonkin or USS Maine to get us all hot and bothered for any more war, because the American people understand who the aggressor is and why these wars are being fought. Yeah. And Lindsey Graham is out there. He's pandering to his Israeli supporters. He's pandering to the military-industrial complex. And my response to Lindsey Graham is, if you really feel that way, that we have to make war on Iran and Russia and China and whoever else is on that list here, here's your rifle. Here's your parachute. We ran out of the camo fatigues. Here's a bright day-glow orange jumpsuit left over from the CIA torture centers. Watch your head climbing into that transport plane, and we'll call your designated enemies and tell them you are on your way to kick their butt all by yourself.
You know what's interesting about Graham that I sort of researched?
Can we hold that for 4 minutes?
We certainly can.
All right, we got to take a break for our commercials, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And we were
talking about Lindsey Graham.
Yes.
Yeah. And it would be one of my worst nightmare scenarios. And although I don't see a person yet I could really vote for in clear conscience. And the one thing I'd want to mention...
Trump is starting to look good, if for no other reason than he's got some spine to him.
And let's not pretend that we haven't seen this before. Someone originally considered, quote-unquote, unelectable actually winds up getting elected. Remember George Bush?
He was never considered unelectable, and frankly, I think they're going to give Donald Trump the Ron Paul treatment.
Yeah.
And they're already starting. Oh, he should apologize. He's in the wrong. He's not politically correct. Yeah, they're giving him the Ron Paul, and so there's no way he's actually going to win. Mm-hmm. But you have to admire him for having the courage to actually talk about what's really gone wrong with this country.
I agree with you. And it's interesting with Graham's background. He has served in the military as a JAG for the Air Force, but he's never personally seen combat. And it really strikes me, Mike, that the people who've never seen combat seem to be the most gung-ho to start new wars.
Oh, well, because their understanding of war is what they see in movies and TV shows about war is great, and they're believing their own propaganda. And we really need to go back to how wars were done only a few hundred years ago, where the leaders who wanted wars led their own troops into battle, like Napoleon or Alexander the Great. And they put their own families on the line. Stalin lost 2 of his own sons against Germany. And we have a government right now that is splendidly brave about war as long as it's other people's children who are going to be killed and crippled. And I think the real measure of their commitment to war is going to be found out by throwing them and their families into uniforms and putting them on the front line. Mm-hmm. And after they dodge a few bullets, then say, how do you think about this war now? Is this really something that you want to be doing?
I would agree. I would agree. I'd like us to move over to Syria right now. Apparently...
I don't want to move to Syria. I'm happy here in Hawaii. They don't have hula girls in Syria.
In terms of talking about it.
I'm sorry. I misconstrued.
Yes, you did, dear. Syria now represents the worst refugee crisis in 25 years. More than 4 million Syrians have fled the country, And the Office of the UN High Commissioner for Refugees reported that the total number of Syrian refugees could be more than 4.25 million by the end of the year, including 7.6 million Syrians who are internationally displaced. Well, Obama loves large numbers. He's probably very proud of these.
Yeah, we're number one.
Yeah.
We're number one.
But
yeah.
I, as a very concerned American citizen, I'm not proud of these numbers at all, because I know how deeply the U.S. government is complicit in creating this humanitarian catastrophe.
It is. You can't have these invasions and overthrows without causing harm, whether it's what happened to Iraq. I mean, go on out to your favorite web search engine and look for photos of Iraq before Operation Desert Storm, and what a beautiful, well-cared-for place it was. Then look at photos of what it looks like today. Same thing with Libya, same thing with Yemen, same thing with Syria, and let's not forget about Ukraine.
Oh.
Prior to the U.S. overthrow, the coup d'etat in January of last year, Ukraine was a happening place. Good culture, good population, good industry, good agriculture. It was an perfectly operating country. And yes, there was political corruption, but then find me any nation on this planet where there isn't political corruption. And now, of course, it's devolved into a bloody civil war. It's destroyed their industrial base. It's destroyed their agriculture. And this is what the U.S. foreign policy brings to the world. Death, destruction, poverty, starvation.
And, I'm sorry, go ahead.
All to make the money junkies happy.
Yeah. Speaking of Ukraine, the NATO is now opening a regional headquarters in Lithuania amidst the Ukraine crisis. NATO will open the first Baltic regional headquarters for its new rapid reaction force in Lithuania in the coming months, amid growing concerns over, quote-unquote, Russian aggression in Ukraine. And it seems to me, Mike, like this is more picador-like behavior on the part of NATO against Russia.
Of course it is. Of course it is. The goal is to find something that they can do that seems insignificant to Americans, but provokes a Russian response that can be seized on as, oh, they're the bad guys. Roosevelt did exactly the same thing to Japan leading up to the attack on Pearl Harbor. He spent all of 1941 implementing an 8-step plan crafted by Office of Naval Intelligence Lieutenant Arthur H. McCollum of things that the U.S. would do, which to the American sensibilities weren't a big deal, but were considered horribly insulting to the Japanese point of view. And Roosevelt did all 8 of the steps, and after the 8th one, the Japanese attacked us at Pearl Harbor. And Roosevelt got up there saying, oh, this was a huge surprise. We had no idea, those dastardly Japanese. And he tricked the American people into World War II, which was primarily against Nazi Germany on behalf of Joseph Stalin. And it was only after Germany was defeated that they finally diverted the resources back to the Pacific to mop things up over there. This is how wars get started by the U.S. government. Lies, frauds, deceptions, and hoaxes.
Yeah, and Russia has done absolutely nothing wrong here. Ukraine was hit with a putsch last year so that Poroshenko could be installed because he was viewed to be more Western NATO-centric than his predecessor. And with Crimea, after the fall of the legitimately elected government, Crimea asked to come back and join the Russian Federation. They were historically Russian and Russian-speaking until Khrushchev annexed in the 50s.
It was a 2-step process.
Yeah.
Crimea first voted to secede from Ukraine, which is their right to do under the United Nations Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Then after they seceded, they voted to merge with Russia. And the Western media and the U.S. government propagandists are still out there trying to say that this was Russian aggression. Russia stole Crimea. Russia invaded. They're doing this and they're doing that. And the good news is, of course, they're not getting a lot of traction from that. And it's unfortunate that so much of our current policy is being run by these fossils left over from the Cold War of the 1950s and 1960s, because they still think those kind of propaganda tricks continue to work, and they don't.
Nope.
And that is our best hope for a non-nuclear resolution to the current conflict, is they can't find a way to get the American people to go along with flinging what's left of our money and our sons and daughters onto a major war against a major military peer.
Yeah, this cannot possibly be construed as quote-unquote Russian aggression when the aggressors are NATO, the U.S., and the IMF.
Absolutely. Look at all the places the U.S. has invaded or drone struck or subverted or overthrown over the last 13 years. It is very clear who the aggressor is. We got to take another break for commercials, and we will be right back. Hi, America. Welcome back to our show. And what is your next topic, Claire? My lovely wife, my lovely wife, my lovely wife.
Thank you, dear.
Okay.
Confusing congressional food stamp cut strikes in Michigan. And this is about a lady of Clinton Township, Michigan. And she was wondering why her monthly food stamps went down from more than 100 a month to just 16 in February. The letter, she said, didn't say much, but, I mean, you've got to look at that as being completely drastic. Now, I'm a pretty good, confident, savvy shopper when it comes to groceries in terms of prices and such, but that kind of cut is draconian, and apparently the real culprit is Washington. The Farm Bill President Barack Obama signed into law last year came with reductions to the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. Republicans pushed for steep cuts, arguing that food stamps were going to too many able-bodied adults who didn't have children and didn't have jobs. What is this woman supposed to do? Dumpster dive for food?
Well, this is what happens when Washington believes its own propaganda that the unemployment rate is only 5.6%.
Oh, this just sickened me because most of the food banks in this country are either completely tapped out or running or nearly running out of food on food distribution day. And we know this because Mike and I support a co-sponsored food distribution with our local Catholic Church and Methodist Church, which are partnering on this. And it's always a race to make sure that we have enough bags to provide for all the clients, characterized as food insecure by the state of Hawaii. And about the jobs, I mean, come on, that's a forget about it moment. I mean, for every job that is advertised, and most of them are very low paying, you'll have 500, 600, 700 people come out for one job. And why? Because the good jobs have been allowed to be outsourced and offshored.
They've gone to other countries.
Yeah.
We'll let those other countries manufacture. We don't need to manufacture products. We have the service economy. We don't even have that anymore.
No,
we really don't. And the reality is, and I guess Washington, D.C. is actually a giant church where they have this religion they've invented about how wonderful everything is, and they believe the official story about everything. They believe it's only 5.6 unemployment rate, and that's the only reason to explain this idea about, we can cut the food stamps here, and Jeb Bush is out there saying we can fix the economy if you Americans just work longer hours. Work longer hours at what? There are no jobs. We have 93 million Americans willing and able to work who want jobs, who cannot find them. Yeah. And on top of that, we have all these illegals who are coming in, who are taking jobs for lower pay because they're not paying taxes. Mm-hmm. And it's an absolute disaster. And, and I understand that Donald Trump is not perfect. Okay, but at least he's out there saying we've got some real problems that we need to look. We can't pretend they're not a problem anymore just because it's politically correct to pretend it's not a problem. We have to look at this thing. I mean, political correctness is Captain E.J. Smith standing on the bridge of the Titanic with the ice water up to his kneecaps saying, but this ship is unsinkable. This ship is unsinkable.
It is a form of societal collapse that we're looking at, and yet it's like the emperor's new clothes. No one wants to really take a look.
Except those of us in the independent media, and apparently Donald Trump, who's willing to stand up and say the emperor's naked, and ooh, is he ugly.
Yes. I'd kind of like to move back to an earlier topic I know you've addressed. Why Hillary Clinton is moving to the left on every issue except Israel. And apparently in this very strident letter she wrote to the very hawkish donor, Hayam Saban, she hints that she may oppose a two-state resolution at the UN for there to be a Palestinian state.
Which is not what she was saying when she was Secretary of State, I might add.
No, definitely not. But you know something, Mike? I don't want a president who is declared good for Israel. I don't want a president who gives the orders for throwing bullets, bombs, and bodies at countries Israel doesn't very much like. And
I don't want any politician who is looking at any other country as more important than this one. And it's become so ubiquitous most Americans, unfortunately, are just accepting it, much as the way the British subjects are just accepting that people in positions of power are going to bugger little children. It's just become part of the background noise. Mm-hmm. And that's something that we definitely need to look at. And because Donald Trump is basically paying for his own campaign, I'm hoping he will have the gonads at some point to stand up and say, we need to talk about all this pro-Israel lobbying and money coming on in that is skewing the national debate.
I agree, and I do think that a Clinton presidency will be a very bloody presidency with more and more wars fought to defend this ruthlessly apartheid, self-proclaimed theocracy with nuclear weapons, which is Israel. The dead and the maimed will be ours, so will the financial burdens of these wars.
We're not going to be fighting those wars to defend Israel. We're going to be fighting those wars to enlarge Israel's territory.
Exactly. But the rationale is, quote-unquote, defend. And we, the people, deserve far better than I believe a Clinton candidacy can ever deliver.
You know what's really amazing here? Even though everybody now knows Israel has nuclear weapons, they got their first-generation weapons-grade uranium from here in the United States of America. The Pentagon has released reports confirming Israel's nuclear weapons, and yet in Washington, D.C., the official policy is still, no, Israel does not have nuclear weapons. And there's a certain arrogance there, and this is tied in with that whole political correctness idea, that it doesn't matter what the truth is. The politically correct position is Israel is helpless, being victimized by his neighbors. It's a fantasy world that they've created, and they're demanding that we all go along with the fantasy.
I can't drink the Kool-Aid, thank you very much.
Washington, D.C. is turning out to be worse than the Scientologists.
If that's
and I apologize to the Scientologists. Don't get on my case.
And, you know, if Republicans had a brain cell between them, they would seriously look at the possibility of drafting Linda Lingle, the former governor of Hawaii, as VP at least. Now, we've met her, and we have some philosophical disagreements on some issues. However, I found her bright, charming.
She knows the job.
Yeah.
If John McCain had chosen Linda Lingle
that would have been so different.
Instead of Caribou Barbie, he would have been the president.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because she was absolutely real. Speaking of Caribou Barbie, this kind of really struck me funny. Not funny in terms of laughter, but funny in terms of yikes. Apparently there is a Jesus camp for adults which seeks to impose Christianity on the U.S. by converting 1,000 pastors into politicians. And they gathered in Orlando on Friday with a single goal in mind, to learn how to adapt their preaching and outreach skills for the pursuit of political office. And Mike Huckabee gave the keynote address. Okay, guys, here's the deal for me. I am a Christian, I'm a Methodist, I'm a pacifist. But this kind of thinking scares the stuffing out of me.
Isn't it kind of weird? The same people who are always saying theocracy in the Middle East is bad.
Yeah, but it's fine here.
Yeah, they're trying to create one here. And, you know, if you are a politician under the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, you can be whatever religion you want to be, but you cannot show favor to that religion.
No.
That is absolutely forbidden. And this group obviously is ready to throw the Bill of Rights in the shredder to bring about a theocracy, and we will burn the heretics, and we're going to get those witches and all those Satan worshipers and everything.
The movement is called Dominionism.
We're going into a new dark ages.
Yeah. And Dominionism has been highly effective in, shall we say, taking over various Pentecostal churches, including
They're the ones who want to actually blow up the world because they think Jesus is going to come down and invite them up to the big house when it's all over.
Well, it's a little bit less draconian than that. At alternate.org in 2008, it was reported this third wave is a revival of the theology of the latter rain tent revivals in the 1950s and 60s. It is based on the idea that in the end times there will be an outpouring of supernatural powers on a group of Christians that will take over authority over the existing church and the world.
Ooh, the cosmic Jewish zombie is coming back. We got to take a break for commercials. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Last segment of our program here on this Pauhana Friday. And Claire, you had one more story you wanted to share with us.
Yes. Encryption is as American as apple pie. The Founding Fathers frequently used it, and it helped win the Revolutionary War. And with this battle between the NSA, FBI, and other government agencies who are pushing to outlaw encryption, and those who want privacy, is the same battle fought by the Founding Fathers more than 200 years ago. After all, the NSA is doing to modern Americans what King George did to colonial America, which was one of the main reasons the founders launched the revolution. And Benjamin Franklin was called a traitor, like Edward Snowden, for blowing the whistle on the government's actions. Encryption may seem to be a new affair. However, it is very old school and something which the Founding Fathers used extensively. The current demand for only the encryption that the government agencies can decipher is a clear demonstration of a government terrified of its own citizens. And, dear, as you demonstrated 6 times on the website, none of the alphabet soup agencies in the U.S. were able to decipher the encryption you created.
You know, that's one of the weird things about this whole situation. Okay, we proved that anybody with a moderate amount of programming experience can come up with systems of encryption that cannot be broken. Because as we mentioned in our page, on our article on the subject, decoding a message is a 2-step process. First of all, you have to figure out the method. Then you can divine the particular key used for a specific message. Of the two, figuring out the method is the hard part. The Allies were not able to break the German Enigma machine until they physically captured one, and only then was Alan Turing able to build his machine to brute force the keys. And the same is true today. So the reality is, we already know that NSA, GCHQ, U.S. Cyber Command, they're not going to be able to break any newly created codes that are being used by real criminals and real terrorists.
No.
By me to protect my Aunt Mary's top secret chocolate chip cookie recipe. So obviously this ban on encryption is all about keeping watch on law-abiding citizens to spy on what they're saying, to make sure they're not thinking those double plus ungood thoughts, to steal their business secrets for their own profit, which they have been caught doing time and again. And as Edward Snowden revealed, they copy off the pictures, the naked pictures of your girlfriend, boyfriend, son's daughter, whatever, and trade them around like free porn trading cards. And that's what they're doing. And right now, the NSA is the biggest cyber criminal on the planet. And Kaspersky Labs have confirmed that some of the biggest criminal hacking groups are actually fronts for the National Security Agency. In fact, it's entirely possible that NSA broke into the Office of Personnel Management to get all that classified information about government employees so that they've got blackmail material to constrain them to whatever the NSA decides is the best course for the nation. And the problem with that, of course, is the NSA is not a representative government of we the people. It's not elected. It is a power unto itself, and it represents tyranny and dictatorship.
Yeah, and the harder they push, I think the more angry a lot of Americans are becoming.
I know I am.
Yeah, it really bothers me. I mean, you and I live a very quiet life most of the time, except for activities on the net and the website and the radio show. We never advocate use of violence. We understand how it can happen, but we don't advocate it. And, they're probably surveilling all my calls to the sister at the Catholic Church who coordinates the food drive. Oh, it's suspicious. She was calling someone about bringing bread. This is ridiculous,
That's
Michael.
Code word for an anthrax attack. Go on in there and kick down their door.
No, I would like to hope not. But I mean, this government itself, the federal government, has gotten completely out of control.
They're all collectively insane.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's because they're all doped up on prescription antidepressants, because we know people in government and the police forces are taking far more of those than ordinary citizens, and we know they can seriously derail your thinking. During Obama's second year in office, it was reported once that he was being treated for depression. And if he's on some of these same medications as all these mass shooters over in these gun grabber hoaxes, we're in serious trouble. We have got to have a clean and sober government in Washington, D.C. And we know they're not sober, and we know they're not clean, at least on prescription medications, and maybe something else. I just saw a report go by about how the head of the NAACP, the president of the NAACP, just got arrested for selling cocaine. So
that's really tragic. That's really awful.
One nation under medication.
Yike. One other issue I'd like to address very briefly.
Okay.
The end of aspartame. Study links diet soda to major problems. Now, aspartame is something that people who know a little bit about the chemical will tell you to avoid at all costs. But In a study published in 2014, which took place over 10 years and involved 60,000 women, it was determined that women who drink 2 or more diet sodas a day have a much higher risk of cardiovascular disease and are much more likely to die from cardiovascular problems.
And remember, aspartame was originally classed as a biological weapon, okay, until Donald Rumsfeld, who, when he was at SEER, he lobbied the U.S. government to get it approved as an artificial sweetener. But it was formally considered a biological weapon. It's a neurotoxin. And they just figured, well, it tastes sweet. We'll put it in the soft drinks, and who cares if it melts their brains? They're thinking too much about what we're doing anyway. And it can trigger Parkinson-like symptoms in a lot of people. Somebody needs to get that to Michael J. Fox.
Yes.
And we had this lady did a documentary called Sweet Misery.
I remember that, yes.
Where she had come down with what appeared to be Parkinson's disease and found out it was being caused by the aspartame. And it's just another constant reminder. This government and these corporations will sell you anything they can sell you, even if it is bad for you, to make a fast buck. And if it makes you sick, hey, that's good for the economy, because then you have to go to the doctor and give them your money, and you have to go to the pharmacy and give them your money, and that's what keeps the economy going, is always forcing the American people to spend more money. Of course, it breaks down at the point where we don't have any more money to spend, and we don't want to borrow any more on credit, which is where we are right now.
Yeah.
And still over on Wall Street, they're whining about the problem with the economy is the consumers keeping their wallet closed. They're being selfish. They're being greedy and hanging on to their money, and they're not putting it back into the system. Actually, you could say that about the money junkies, who are hoarding billions, if not trillions, in cash and refusing to recycle it back into the economy.
Right, or in some sort of off-sea shelter of some kind, like Monaco or Honduras.
Well, anything else?
I think that's it for today, and thank you so much.
All right, well, we've got a couple more minutes here, and as a matter of fact, getting on back to that encryption issue, one of the stories we ran on whatreallyhappened.com today was Insanity on the Thames, from the Daily Bell, no less, and basically coming out and saying this is ridiculous and it's pointless. And Cameron is flat out lying when he says this is about finding the terrorists and criminals, and we would never, ever, ever, ever look into the personal communications of law-abiding citizens, which was the same pile of steaming bovine excrement the U.S. government fed to you when the NSA scandal first broke. Okay? Now then, apparently the National Treasury Employees Union, whose records were caught up in that Office of Personnel Management hack, they're now suing the federal government over the loss of their personnel records. And again, we're seeing this double standard. When it's the government workers' privacy being invaded, then it's a big stink and something must be done. But for non-government employees, the little people, you people, you should not be upset about your privacy being violated by government agents with a proven track record of stealing business secrets from the American people for their own profit, finding information to blackmail you with, stealing naked pictures of your girlfriend, boyfriend, what have you. And they have been doing that. All right, we're almost to the top of the hour. Real quick, human-caused global warming. U.S. Midwest having its coldest 3 years on record. Summer snowstorm hits California's eastern Sierra. Heavy midsummer snowfall blankets Vorkuta, northern Russia. And that big pile of snow in Boston from last winter, it's still there.
Wow.
Another month, it's going to qualify as a glacier. There's the music. It's time for us to get on out of here. I got to get ready to launch the new whatreallyhappened.com website. Please make a point of calling your local talk radio stations. Point them at gcnlive.com. Ask them to carry our programming. We'll be back Monday. Aloha, America.